With the War Thunder winter sales going on, you want to know which premiums you should buy. So I took it upon myself to rank every single premium jet in the game. I'll be ranking them on their effectiveness in air-to-air combat, and there will be timestamps so you can jump to your favorite country. Let's get into it. Starting things off for America, we have the F-89B. While I think a machine could do really well with this, with its good guns and strong engine power, as an actual human being, I don't think I could recommend this plane to anybody at all. It's one of the least user-friendly planes you can pick up, so even with its above-average engine power, I find it difficult to get kills because you can't point your nose at people, which is not conducive to grinding. It used to be a king, but oh, it's fallen from grace. I have to put it in the D tier. Now, everything I just said about the F-89B also applies to the F-89D, but even worse. The rockets have been significantly nerfed, so they don't do very much damage anymore. Sure, you might get a one-shot every once in a while, but most of the time, you're gonna find yourself hitting, 7 or 8 rockets and people still not dying. Combine this with the fact that there's no tracers on these rockets, so you have no idea where they're going past like half a kilometer when the motor burns out. Once again, going in the D tier. The AV-8A is a very effective grinder as it outperforms basically anything in the climb department. Combine this with 2 AIM-9Gs, and you can orbital strike people because gamers don't look up. Once you don't have your 2 missiles, however, you're not the greatest fighter. Sure, you have thrust vectoring to help you with one turn, but if you don't hit your shot on that one turn, you're out of energy. I'm gonna put it in B tier as it's generally pretty effective and easy to use. Oh, the A-10. How I wish you were never added to the game. This thing has AIM-9Ls at 10.3, which just kinda deletes anything that doesn't have flares. I can't put it in S tier because with its flight performance, it will struggle to catch up to people, but if you happen to get inside of the 5-kilometer death zone of the A-10, there's no hope for you. The F-5C was already one of the best premiums in the game, and with the advent of 10.7, it's only going to get better, because now it gets many less up tiers than it used to. It's extremely survivable as it has both flares and really strong energy retention, and you have really solid guns. Please do take the armored targets belts, as the HE filler on them are bugged right now, but you can set fire to anything with your high velocity guns, and AIM-9Es aren't the worst thing you could ever have. Sure, it could be better, but it's still generally effective at that battle rating for the purposes you would use a missile. This is an easy S tier. Remember what I just said about the A-10? Well, take that and then make it better in every single way possible, and you get the A-6E Tram. Even if you do take a gun, you still have one more AIM-9L than the A-10, but you don't have the downside of having the same top speed as a P-51 Mustang. I haven't played it much yet, so my opinion isn't fully formed, but for now, I'm gonna put it at the top of A tier, though depending on how the matchmaker turns out, it could be bordering on S tier. Germany doesn't get very many premiums for the size of its tech tree, but the ones it does get are generally pretty good. The G91R4 has 4 AIM-9Bs, or air-to-air Nords if you're into that. The 50 cals may not be the greatest guns considering you only have 4 of them, but you get a decent ammo capacity, and they have really high velocity, making them easy to use, and you can just cripple your enemies over time so that you can get your AIM-9B shots in. Unlike some of the other premiums on this list, this one takes a little bit of skill to use, as you're going to be fighting things like Sabres and MiG-15s. So, while it is decently good, I'm gonna put it in C tier because it doesn't define the matchmaker by any means. Germany's first MiG-21 premium is the SPSK, and it gets 2 R-60s, which are 30G high maneuverability missiles. You can use these to just grief 2 people who don't have flares, and considering it's on the MiG-21 platform, this also means you have good acceleration and can climb up to altitude pretty easily. This lets you get out of reach of stuff like the A-10, where you're not going to have flares to be able to dodge their missiles. You can just use your ability to climb to get so high up that they're not going to look there, and then dive down behind them, getting a couple free kills on super slow attackers. I'm going to put it in B tier because it doesn't have flares unless you don't take a gun. The MiG-21 Laser M is just a copy and paste of the MiG-21 Bis, but I actually think it's one of the most underrated premiums right now that came out at Tier 7. You have access to R-60Ms, which are extremely potent short-range missiles, and a lot of people just love to commit to head-ons, letting you missile them from like a kilometer away, where they don't have time to both flare and get out of the way of it. I'm gonna put this in the A tier. Starting off, the Soviet Union is one of the most overpowered planes in the game, tier for tier, if not the most overpowered. The Su-11 sits at 7.0 when it has the same thrust to weight ratio as a MiG-15. It really should be a 7.7 or even an 8.0 plane at this point, but with the number of people who flock to this for easy kills, it sits at a lower battle rating. Easy S tier here. The Su-7 BMK is an extremely fast strike aircraft, and it certainly had its time in the spotlight as the best grinder for Russia. However, this list is based off of their effectiveness as a fighter, and the Su-7 only really has speed going for it, and 9.3 is really that threshold where basically every game you're getting up-tiered into high-performance supersonics and high probability of kill missiles. Great for bombing if that's your thing, but I'm putting it in the D tier. The MiG-21S R-13-300 is proof that having mid-missiles can be made up for with outstanding performance. The R3R radar-guided missile is very good for shooting down people without radar warning receivers, or just people who don't have chaff, or don't know how to dodge radar missiles in general. Combine this with the MiG-21 MF engine, which is a 10.3 aircraft, mind you, lets you put in a lot of work, as the MiG-21S sits at 9.7, B tier. The Su-25K is another one of those ground attackers that they put at a really low BR because it isn't the greatest airframe, despite the fact that it has 30G all-aspect missiles. This is just another aircraft where you get to grief two people's games for free, going into A tier with all the other trolley attackers. Russia's new Tier 7 premium is the MiG-23 ML. It plays effectively the same as the MiG-23 MLD, which last patch, remember, was debatably a top 3 aircraft in the game. It stomps on basically everything that isn't the MiG-29 or the F-16 or the Tomcat. So I'd say this is probably the best Tier 7 premium in the game. This is gonna go into S tier. British players, I'm sorry, I haven't played basically any of your premiums before. I have no clue how good the Attacker FB2 is. I watched a Defin video on it, and it seems pretty average, so I'm gonna put it in C tier. It's another one of those low tier jets where you're gonna stomp on all of the props, but all of the other jets are going to stomp on you. The Meteor Mark 8 sits at 8.0, which can be pretty hit or miss. Within your own tier, you're a pretty good plane. You have good energy for a Meteor, good guns, and of course, it turns well. However, there's also the possibility that you get matched up against things like the MiG-15 Bis and Sabres, so in an up tier, it's not necessarily great. I'm gonna put it in C tier, as it's not necessarily up tier proof, but it's pretty effective within its own battle rating. Man, the Sea Vixen has got to be one of the most annoying planes you can play against. But I get why a lot of British pick it up, as it's a very effective grinder. You have really strong engines allowing you to climb and get to high speeds. Plus, the red tops are pretty good at the battle rating. It's hard to dodge them if you don't know how. If this thing had guns, it would easily be S tier, but seeing as it doesn't, I'm gonna put it in A tier. Oh, Lightning, I wish you were better. It's such a cool plane, but it's in an unfortunate matchmaker. You have high performance, and you have red tops, which are a good combination, but being 9.3 kind of kills it, as you basically only get up tiers, and at that point, everything's performing just as good as you. This doesn't mean you can't have fun in it, but I'm gonna put it at the top of D tier. 10.0 with bad flight performance and only mid-missiles? Man, the Harrier GR1 used to be the most overpowered premium in the game, but now it's really quite sad. I have to put it in D tier as well. The F4J, while nothing special, is still pretty effective. You have the pulse Doppler radar and you have sky flashes, which are a pretty decent combination, and the AIM-9G is in the best state it's ever been before. British players, you'll need this to grind in anticipation of the new Tornado, the fighter variant, the one that's actually good. I'm gonna put it in B tier. This is the only premium I would recommend to Japanese players, the F86 F40 JASDF. Boy, that is a mouthful to say. I would place it higher if it wasn't 9.0, but at that battle rating, you run a much higher risk of running into up tiers than, say, 8.7. It still gets a decent enough amount of down tiers that I'm gonna put it at C. Please don't buy the T2 early. You have bad flight performance and bad missiles. There's absolutely no reason to play this thing. It's gonna go into F tier. The F4EJ ADTW, while being a rank 7 premium, I don't think I personally would ever play it. You're just an F4E, but you lose your two best components, being the Agile Eagle upgrade giving you maneuverability, and the AIM-7 E2 Sparrow giving you a close-in dogfight head-on missile. This has gotta be one of the worst planes you can play at top tier, and I wouldn't recommend to buy it as a premium. D tier. Oh, the Shenyang F5, 9.3, subsonic, no flares. You can't really get away with that when you're facing stuff like the A6E and the Su-25. You at least have flight performance in a dogfight, which is excusable, but just play the German Limb 5. It's one step lower in battle rating, and you trade that off for the missiles that you weren't really even using anyway. The A5C, I actually bought this myself as a grinder. It's an easy S tier. You have really strong flight performance, you have flares, and you have magic 2s. And this sits below the F5C, which has the same combination of traits, but without the easy-to-use missiles. It's gonna be S tier. The J7D is just a MiG-21 MF, a normally 10.3 plane, at 11.0. However, you trade off the base R60s for access to PL-5Bs, which is one of the best missiles in the game, hands down. For this, I'm gonna put it in the B tier. The Italian G91R4 is identical to the German one, but it researches a better tech tree in my opinion, so I'm gonna place it one step above it. I strongly debated the placement of the Ariete, as it has a really strong combination of traits. It's the best dogfighter in the game, tier for tier. However, it's subsonic with no flares and no missiles. And that's an inexcusable combination of traits at 9.3. I'm gonna put it in the bottom of C tier, though I'm still not sure if this is really where it should go. The F104S TAF, I was prepared to call absolute garbage, but hey, it actually has flares. Combine this with the strongest F104 engine, and it can actually be pretty decent. Plus, 10.7 gets a consistent amount of down tiers, so even though you're only limited to AIM-9Js or AIM-7Es, it's actually pretty decent, as nothing can really catch you and you have access to 6 missiles. I think I'm gonna put this in B tier. The Valtour may be a bomber, but it's not unusably awful. You have decent energy retention, plus you have access to anti-air Nords, letting you take some silly head-ons. I'm obviously not going to rank this very high, but it's not an F tier. It can go into D tier. The Milan is fast, but that's about it. You don't really have any other traits that redeem it as a fighter, so I'm going to put it pretty low in D tier. But once again, as I've said for some other aircraft, you can still use this thing as a bomber pretty effectively, but that isn't the intention of this list. I love how Gaijin saw the Mirage F1, the worst 11.3 in the game, and decided to turn it into a premium. You can never be too bad with access to Magic 2s, but there's literally nothing else going for this plane. I'm gonna put it in C tier as it's the best grinder that France has access to, and once again, the Magic 2 is very good. But like, France only has one good plane to grind out anyway in the Mirage 2000, so it really isn't that worth it. Sweden mains, please don't be at my throat for this, but the Saab 105 is one of the worst planes in the game if you're trying to use it as a fighter. I will give it some cool points, because it at least climbs decently well, and you can take the funny 4-missile loadout with 2 AIM-9Bs and 2 RBO-5s, which are an ATGM, but it has a proxy fuse, so you can use it against air targets. Still, it's gonna be F tier. The J-35A, on the other hand, yeah, still not that great. You're 9.7 with AIM-9Bs and no flares, and you bleed all your speed. It's a pretty fun aircraft to play if you get into the right situations, but those situations happen so few and far between that I can't rank this any better than D tier. The J-35XS, on the other hand, it's at least usable, which is a lot more than I can say about the other Swedish premiums. It has access to flares technically, but it only gets 6 drops of them, meaning that if you try and flare even like 1 or 2 decent missiles, it's gonna burn through all your flares and then you're a sitting duck again. But hey, we're gonna get into C tier this time with it. Israeli players, you probably know where this one is going. The F-84F is garbage. It's one of the worst jets in the game, tier for tier. I would never buy this thing. This is an easy F tier. The A4E is decent. I'll give it that. It has an improved engine over the American ones, and the tech tree version of the A4E for Israel. So you're actually pretty fast, and you can make up for your speed bleed a little bit. The main attracting point, though, is that you have flares at 8.7. This alone is gonna put it in B tier for me. When you buy the Kafir Canard, you're buying 2 AIM-9Gs on a Mirage platform. It doesn't even have the airframe redesign of the other Kafirs. Sadly, though, this is also the most effective grinder that Israel has in the first place. I'm gonna put it in D tier. Well, this is the completed list, and welcome back everybody who skipped ahead to see it. Like my other tier lists, this is posted publicly on tiermaker.com, so if you have differing opinions on it, you can come into my Discord server and post your own. Other than that, though, that's all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.